Hey fellow vote-wearers, it's Angry Turtle, and welcome into the second episode of OneWasteland Math with Turtle. And now, what I promised you before, we'll be talking about armor and anti-armor effects, all of those effects and how those works, and how this stuff work in case of energy weapons, ballistic weapons. And let me show you some examples of anti-armor effects. Let me open my Pip-Boy. Oh, and what's that? What happened with my Pip-Boy? Oh, I know, we have new Patreons that I want to welcome. And those are Mighty Daveman, Rake, Hamidi, and Brian. Welcome into Turtle's army, guys. I truly appreciate your support. Thank you. And now, back into the topic. Anti-armor. Like for example, this laser. This is energy weapon, and anti-armor legendary effect give you 50% armor penetration. And there is more effects that you can use. There are perks. Like for example, stabilized. If in power armor you can have 45% armor penetration. Or for rifles, Tank Killer, that can give you 36% armor penetration. And for some weapons, but not for all the weapons, you can equip a magazine that gives you armor penetration. Like perforating magazine, it just says superior here, but it's 40% armor penetration. Or piercing, that's 20%. Or stinging magazine, that as well, 20% armor penetration. Then we have multiple sources of armor penetration and two main damage types that your weapon can be doing. Like this, like in here, 27 damage, that's ballistic damage. This crosshair indicates that it's doing ballistic damage. And all those weapons ballistic damage, and if you have weapon that is doing energy damage, then you have this like thunder symbol. Then that's energy damage, and that's important because for those two weapons, damage is calculated differently, and we'll be talking about it. I will not demonstrate in this video because I did it in older video, what's the difference in practice. Then if you want to watch it, then I will put it somewhere on the screen here. Then you can click it and see what's the difference between energy and ballistic. But now we are going into Microsoft Paint because I figure out it will be the easiest way for me to demonstrate how this stuff works and what's wrong with it. Okay, and here we are in Microsoft Paint. What I'm trying to show you on this graph is how energy and ballistic damage compare with each other and what's the difference, because those two are using different formula to determine your damage versus target that have any resistance. Then first, 50, let's say that's 50, it's our base weapon damage. And we assume that we have energy and ballistic damage that are exactly the same weapon with 50 damage. One weapon 50 ballistic, other one 50 energy damage. That's a base damage without any bonuses. And as you can see on this graph, they going exactly, that's a single line. The damage will be exactly the same. What means that in case of the enemy with 100 resistance, from our 50 base damage, we will do 25 damage. That's our damage, and that's enemy resistance. Energy and ballistic resistance the same. And now, what happened if you boost this damage? Like from this 50, let's say with perks or legendary effects, you go to 100. That's very realistic scenario, but now you can see that those lines split. The blue line, it's a ballistic damage. The red line, it's the energy damage. And clearly energy is in disadvantage in here, because you can see that ballistic will do 50 damage versus enemy that have 100 resistance. But energy weapon will do less than 40 damage versus the same enemy with same amount of energy resistance. And it's going way worse if you are able to boost your damage much more. Luckily, in OneWasteland we cannot boost damage so much like before. It's one of the reasons that before OneWasteland energy weapons were underperforming even more than now, because now you just simply cannot boost damage so much. Then here, another example, it's the same weapon, but boosted to 250 damage. And you can see how huge difference will be for 100 resistance target. Like ballistic weapon will do about 175 damage, but energy weapon will do less than 100 damage. Then it's like weaker by almost half. And that's the difference between energy and ballistic damage calculation. But we want to go back to the point and we want to discuss anti-armor. We'll leave it alone. It's bad that Bethesda decided to do it like that, and I hope they will change it at some point, because in my opinion, energy and ballistic should use exactly the same formula to determine the damage those are doing, and only energy resistance of the mob should be a factor, like difference between ballistic and energy. At this moment, even if mob have way less energy resistance than ballistic resistance, if your energy weapon is heavily boosted, it will do less damage than ballistic counterpart. Okay, anti-armor. I have different graph. Okay, now we have one graph with only ballistic damage, because for purpose of explaining anti-armor, it doesn't matter if we explaining ballistic or energy, it all works the same. Then let's say we have weapon that comes with anti-armor legendary effect, that's 50% armor penetration, and we have like stabilized, that's additional 45% armor penetration. Now, how to figure out what your damage will be? Let's assume, for purpose of this explanation, that we are facing enemy with 200 resistance. Then that will be in here. Without any armor penetration, we'll be doing damage that's in here whenever we go up to 100 and we cross the curve of the damage. Then it's about 40, a little bit less than 40 damage. Now, how to calculate for those both? It's not additive. You cannot add this both together. It's not 95% armor penetration. How you do it? You apply them one by one to enemy armor. The order doesn't matter. You can apply stabilize first or anti-armor first. It doesn't matter. The result will be the same. Then we had this 200 armor. Then it will be 200 multiplied by 0.5, because that's 50%. Otherwise, like, you can put 50% at 0.5. That's the same thing. 50%, 0.5, the same thing. And that will give us 100. What's very easy to calculate. Then we started with 200, that's the damage resistance. Cut by half, because 0.5, 50%, we are at 100. Then we are here. With just anti-armor, our weapon will be doing about 50 damage, or exactly 50 damage. Yeah, exactly 50 damage. Now, we have stabilized on top of everything. That's 45%. Then, we take this 100 armor that we have remaining, we put 100 and multiply it by 0.45. Because we have 45% from stabilized. Then this is 45, but don't be mistaken, it's not that remaining armor is 45, it's how much we penetrate. We penetrate additional 45 armor, what means we end up at 55, what will be like in here. Enemy will be left with 55 armor, and in this case we are doing over 60 damage. Something over 60 damage. Then you can see how it is going. Now let's wipe it off and do the same thing for the rifle, because we have more bonuses in case of a rifle. Now, in case of a rifle, what we have available? To penetrate armor, we'll have perforating magazine. Perforating magazine, that's 40%. Tank killer, I'm not very good in writing on that. Okay, that's tank killer. That's 36%. And let's say we have as well anti-armor weapon. Then that's additional 50%. Now let's calculate that. Again, starting with enemy with 200 damage resistance. We use anti-armor, we already did it last time. We'll go down to 100. Then, whatever is easier to calculate, we can do tank killer. It's easy to calculate. 100 multiplied by 0.36. That we will end up with 36. Additional 36 armor will be penetrated. Then we count 36, 100 minus 36. That's 64. Then we'll be somewhere in here. 64. And we put a note somewhere. Let's write it down here. We are at 64 armor. Now we add, we did anti-armor, we did tank killer, we have perforating magazine. Then we multiply the 64 by 0.40, what is 25.6. 64 minus 25.6, that will be about 38 damage resistance. Then we'll be somewhere in here. Then our weapon from the initial damage of less than 40 will end up doing over 70 damage. We'll be somewhere in here. Then we'll be doing over 70 damage after applying all those sources of armor penetration. And as you can see on this graph, it's not an error. Every time the initial line will be flat. What means that if you are able to achieve enough armor penetration to end up somewhere in here, you will do maximum damage for the weapon. Basically, enemy armor will be useless. Will do nothing. And it's go on the reverse as well. If you will have very little armor, it will work exactly the same like zero armor. And it is how it is in this game. And now, just to prove my point that order doesn't matter, let me quickly do it in different order. Let's start with a perforating magazine instead of anti-armor. Then we are starting at 200 perforating magazine. It's 200 multiplied by 0.4. That's 80. Then 200 minus 80. We end up at 120. Then we add tank killer. That will be 120 multiplied by 0.36. That's about 43. Then we reduce the armor by 43. Then there is 180, like 77, will be somewhere in here, 77. And now this 77 anti-armor, cut it by half, and we end up with 38, a little bit over 38, exactly the same spot. So you can see, even though we calculated it in different order, we end up in exactly the same spot. The important thing is you don't add those percentages, you just apply one by one to see how much of enemy armor you will be able to cut off. And if you are curious what kind of program I use to get those graphs, there is a very old spreadsheet made by Nor that can help you calculate damage in Fallout 4. There is couple details different in Fallout 76. Then if you want to use this calculator, you need to know what changed to avoid misleading yourself, because not exactly everything is the same. But the main damage formula for both energy and ballistic remains the same, like in this calculator made by Nor for Fallout 4. It was quite a while, but it's still the same. No one ever changed it. And that will be everything for this video. I hope my explanation was helpful for you. If not, if you have some questions, as always, I will try to answer them in comment section. Then don't worry about it. But I think you will have much better understanding of anti-armor in this game at this moment. You just need to see it as something that slices enemy armor. Every additional effect just cut off additional slice of enemy armor. That's the easiest way that you can visualize how this stuff works. And as always, thank you a lot for watching and see you guys in the next one.